So in the Baba chakra, we saw this wheel that goes up and goes down. If we go about mechanical karma or mechanical ways, we just go along with nature. Nature itself just goes in cycles. It goes up, it goes down. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. We go to sleep at night, we wake up in the morning. We basically repeat the same day over and over for the most part. Plants grow in the spring as it is now. They blossom in late spring and summer. They give their seed. And as the fall and winter come, they die. And it starts over again. This is the natural process of nature and happens throughout everything. Societies, humans, animals, the earth, everything. So from our perspective, from our own psyche, the psyche started out as very clean, but very uneducated. So therefore, in order to get that psyche educated with enough wisdom and knowledge to operate a human organism, it goes through a mechanical process of evolution, which is this left side of the sphere, of the wheel going up. And it goes from a mineral and learns from a mineral to a plant, to an animal, and eventually gets to a humanoid. And this is the point at which, in the story of Cupid and Psyche, Psyche was at. Psyche, again, is this beautiful woman, very innocent. The reason she is showing so much beauty is because she is at the natural state of the psyche. She's like similar to a small child or a baby, in which they don't know the horrors of the world. They don't know the inner workings. They are dependent on their parents, and they're just full of life. This is what Psyche is. Psyche is basically a new humanoid being introduced to that world. And then Cupid comes along, who is that energy of the divine, the son of the divine mother in the story, which is Venus. And she sends her son, which is that energy, into our psyche and says, here is my energy. You have free will to do with what you want, but be warned, how you transform that energy depends on the effects you have on it. Depends on whether you evolve or de-evolve. And says, I will guide you, but you have to listen. Do not listen to your sisters, which are your desires, your egos. So in that story, Psyche does fall. She falls to earth and has to perform all these different tasks that are demanded of her in order to regain her true happiness back. And she's mourning and very sad because she's not in harmony with Cupid. She's not in harmony with that energy, the divine within her. So she decides to understand truly what is happening within her. And she takes a third path. On here, the two paths, let me explain the two paths first. There's evolution, there's de-evolution. There's the evolution, but also there's de-evolution. So if we go along mechanical process of nature, which nature just rises and falls, we're just going to go along with that wave as well. De-evolution is really just hell, in which the psyche, since it did not try to filter itself out, nature does it for us. And what's interesting about hell, just because I think it has a lot to do with what we're seeing now in the world, is just as someone becomes a career criminal or ends up in jail, many of them do not believe they're doing anything wrong. So that saying, everyone in jail is innocent. The same idea is the same. It's the same thing. The Baba chakra, the thing that turns it, is ignorance, sleep, along with the other desires of lust, anger, greed. So even though people are in hell, they do not know they are there. They still suffer. And they're still in pain, but they think it's a normal way of life. If you look at that, look at how often that's happening in this world as well. How many people are in pain and they think it's a normal way of life? This is definitely a mindset we do not want to have. Therefore, that is a rude awakening when we discover that. Psyche, in the story of Cupid and Psyche, discovered that. And the only way out of it was to dip into her own psychological hell. So yes, in that story, she does go to hell. But she goes there because that's where her desires and that's where her psychology was. So, for example, if we have a lot of lust, we see someone, let's say we see the opposite sex, and immediately we think of their bodies, not of them as a person. Therefore, we are in our own psychological hell. And to understand that, we should dip into that psychological element and to understand to why it's there and to look in the mind, where is the first element that I found of lust? And you're like, I see it there. And sometimes things that are very animalistic are very hard to see just because they're so close to life. So therefore, we should look in and ask divinity, ask our own Cupid, our own being, for help. And to understand that matter. And with time, it happens. By using this law, this superior law that we see below, Samuel Onvior says, when an inferior law is transcended by a superior law, the superior law washes away the inferior law. This is a law of karma. Basically, it means in order to wash away an inferior action, we perform a superior action. And this doesn't happen immediately, it happens over time. Psyche, in that story of Cupid and Psyche, she ended up getting back to Cupid and rising back up. To read some quotes above, it says, those whose minds are attached to cyclic existence will continue to wander there constantly. And Krishna says, there are two paths, Arjuna, which is a student. Which soul may follow at the time of death? One leads to rebirth and the other to liberation. So he says, may follow the time of death. Yeah, and it doesn't exactly mean physical death, it can mean as well psychological death. If we enter into psychological death in order to transform that energy, then we're obviously entering into liberation. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking that wheel and we're reversing it in order to evolve off the wheel to a higher being than ourselves.